conflict far away, a choke point called the Strait of Hormuz. And suddenly, oil prices surge. But why is an oil producer like Malaysia not spared?
Previously, Malaysia is a net oil exporter, so by logic, supposed to be a beneficiary. But now, since 2022, Malaysia is officially categorized as a net oil importer.
Find out why on Decimal Point. In March 2026, a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, the Strait of Hormuz, became the center of a global energy shock. It's the sea route where tankers carry crude oil from the Persian Gulf. 1 in 5 barrels of global oil supply passes through these waters. When this route is disrupted, oil prices jump higher, and the impact is felt at home almost instantly. We speak to our guest for a business perspective on what the Middle East crisis means for Malaysia. So basically, the Strait of Hormuz has essentially been closed since February 2026 when the war broke out. And for the first time in 4 years, Brent crude oil has risen to $100 per barrel, and with a peak of $126 per barrel. That's what I understand. So it has been described as the worst energy crisis since the 1970s oil crisis. Okay, so doctor, so for our viewers out there who are not very familiar with or who don't follow energy markets closely, can you explain how a narrow waterway thousands of kilometers away can cause such immediate and substantial pain to Malaysia?
Yeah, in this case, the important part is the oil, the crude oil, the importer of crude oil, and also the narrow, because the Strait of Hormuz is narrow, so it can easily be disrupted, and it's very vulnerable to any other crisis or this military crisis, right? So first thing, oil is an important element. The whole world needs the oil. Then in this crisis, right, all the oil producing shipping port, right, is come from the Persian Gulf and then connect to the narrow Strait of Hormuz and then out to the Oman Gulf and then out to the Pacific, then out to everywhere in the world. So if this is being blocked, that means the supply of oil is actually being blocked. Right? And without supply of oil, not only the price will increase, that means the global oil price will increase, will cause a lot of disruption, burden to other lower income group. Not only like that, because of decrease in oil supply, there are other manufacturing that need the oil or the gas component may be disrupted and cannot be continued.
Okay, so I think a lot of us are aware that Malaysia itself is a country that produces petroleum and gas. So from our own petroleum company, Petronas, we know that we produce oil and gas. However, we also import our crude oil requirements and we refine it here in Malaysia. So can you explain why a country like Malaysia that produces oil and gas is also affected, Doctor?
Yeah, previously, Malaysia is a net oil exporter. So by logic, supposed to be a beneficiary. But now, since 2022, Malaysia is officially categorized as a net oil importer. But to make things worse, right, Malaysia actually has this called quality swap. So we are actually exporting our good quality oil out and then importing a lower grade quality oil in, right? Of course, we do not need such a high premium. So when we do a swap like that, it's actually beneficial in terms of profit for Malaysia. But the question nowadays we ask is, why, at least as an oil producing country, why we face such difficulty compared to other countries? So that is some of the question. But what I can see here is, firstly, maybe our oil reserve may not be high enough because we do not expect such situation to happen. Right? Then secondly, people blame that we do the oil swap that cause us to rely a lot of import. But if we have to ask ourselves, all this while, we are benefiting from this type of arrangement. So therefore, this current crisis do not show any structural flaw, but it's a natural structural vulnerability for everybody.
I see. So going forward, would you recommend things change in terms of like the structure?
Yeah, of course. In this case, we should have know that we need to increase our oil reserve, at least for some increment, right? You look at China, one of the countries that do not have oil, but they seem to be very stable, right? Why? Because one of the reasons is they have a lot of stockpiling of the oil reserve that can last them for much longer than those countries that even producing oil. Then the second one, of course, we have to diversification. Even though financial risk market will tell you to diversify your investment, so we have to diversify our source of oil import. But unfortunately, there's not much choices because most of the oil producing countries are come from Middle East, and some countries like Russia, Venezuela, they are being sanctioned by the world, so Malaysia cannot produce. So in this case, it's a little bit difficult on diversification. The third one will be more practical and more long term, that is to diversify our energy consumption towards renewable energy such as solar, wind, or things like China.
So, Doctor, you specifically mentioned just now that Malaysia cannot buy sanctioned oil. However, some countries out there still purchase sanctioned oil from Iran and countries under sanctions. Can you explain why?
First of all, Malaysia depends on international trade. So therefore, we have to play by the rules. So if there is a sanction, then we should not buy something. Otherwise, we are going to get a reciprocal action, like a reciprocal tariff, or we ourselves are being sanctioned by countries like US and Europe. So therefore, it's very important that we follow the international sanction strictly. For many years, the government spending more than the revenue. If there's an increase in subsidies, you will need to cut the allocation of spending from other sectors towards these subsidies.
In September 2025, the government introduced a targeted RON95 petrol subsidy to help Malaysians. But with the rise in global oil prices, can this subsidy be sustained? So another interesting fact is that Malaysia's monthly fuel subsidy has exceeded 4 billion ringgit, and the government has only allocated the funds or the budget for fuel subsidy assuming that the price of oil remains at about 65 USD per barrel. So if this is maintained in the long term, what are the effects and implications it will have on Malaysia's fiscal position?
These subsidies is getting a heavy impact on Malaysia because all this while Malaysia actually have budget deficit, mean that for many years the government spending more than the revenue. So if there's an increase in subsidies, there are certain effects. For example, first alternative, you will need to cut the allocation of spending from other sectors towards these subsidies, right? So therefore, it's actually like an opportunity cost. You increase the spending on subsidies, you have to decrease the spending on other sectors which may be important, for example, education, healthcare, infrastructure. Of course, another option will be borrow money to subsidize, to support these subsidies. So if we borrow money or subsidize through debt borrowing, then another way is you are borrowing future spending to spend on currently on the oil subsidies. So therefore, it actually will affect our ability to spend in the future.
So as one of the measures, the government has also reduced the monthly RON95 subsidy from 300 litres per individual to 200 litres per individual. How long do you think the government can sustain this, and will it have an impact?
I will say that the reduce in the quota do not have much significant impact, because if you ask most Malaysians like myself, I'm never going to use all the quota fully, right? Therefore, don't have much significant effect. But the impact on fully subsidizing the oil will take a heavy toll on the government ability to spend on other sector, or if you borrow money to spend for subsidies, you affect the government ability to spend in the future.
And how long, Doctor, do you think that this can be retained or maintained by the government?
I don't think it can be maintained for long, perhaps maybe for 1 year, but later on, the government may have no choice but to increase the subsidized price so that they will reduce their subsidies burden to the government.
Okay, so we have established, Doctor, that it is unsustainable for the Malaysian government to continue subsidizing for fuel. So, in your opinion, do you think that the government will remove the subsidy and hence the price of fuel will increase for fellow Malaysians?
yes, there's a possibility or high possibility be like that. If the situation remain unchanged or getting worse, right, government cannot increase the subsidies for the fuel. They may even reduce the subsidies so that they will have to increase the subsidized price and then transfer back the burden of subsidies to the user. So people will be asking, if increase the subsidized price, that means by reducing subsidies, is this good or bad? Right? From some economic perspective, you let the market to determine the price, right? Then allocation of resources will be better. For example, people will start to know how to save energy, how to transform from less energy, petrol reliance on other alternative. That people will start to adjust then to make sure that it's more efficient. Otherwise, because if the price of oil already increased, the market price already increased, but we still enjoying a low subsidized price, people will not change accordingly and they cause a misallocation of resources.
So Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has actually guaranteed that Malaysia will have adequate petrol supplies up until May 2026. So yeah, this is okay for the short term. What do you think Malaysia's reserve policy should look like for the long term?
In the long term, of course, there are three ways that we can plan for the long term. Of course, the immediate term, we have nothing much we can do. From now, we know that our current reserve must be increased. If you look at China, a country that do not produce oil, but seem to be more stable than any other country that produce oil because they have a very, very huge or big amount of oil reserve. So they are being some sort like insured about the oil disruption currently. Right? The second one, since Malaysia, there are oil resources in Malaysia, Malaysia may be able to increase the exploration, either the brownfield or the greenfield. If brownfield exploration, in this case, we need to have better technology to extract more oil, higher productivity on oil extraction. But of course, the greenfield is to find the new source of oil, which may be a risky business. But if the oil price is consistently very high, so the risk is actually well taken. So they will encourage more exploration on the greenfield as well. The second part will be, of course, the diversification of oil import, right? But of course, in this case, I mentioned just now, is a problem. So the third one should be more practical and more better choice. There is a change the energy consumption pattern to a more renewable energy, right? Again, in this case, you will see China. China actually very good at using renewable energy such as solar. The level of efficiency not only include they can have energy sufficiency, right? Less reliant on oil. They also are the exporter of solar panel, which is another income to their GDP. And then changing to EV electronic car, they are now, you see, China car, EV car are actually dominating the world hybrid and EV car because of their policy to change from oil reliant to non-oil reliant car industry and things. So this is something that we also have energy plan in the future, but you just need to fast forward it. One more controversial a bit will be on the nuclear energy, right? Malaysia so far heard that there are some plans that to explore nuclear energy, not immediately because we don't have the expertise. We may keep this one as an option. We can invite other expertise from other countries because nowadays most of the country, right, they are actually using nuclear energy, which is quite big potential. Of course, it's risky. Therefore, I don't see it as a very short term, but it's a very good option for long term.
So, Doctor, analysts at Nomura identified a few countries that are the most at risk from this new shift in energy. So that is Thailand, Philippines, India and South Korea. Qatar also has been bombed and their LNG supply has been disrupted. How does this affect and reshape Malaysia's energy supply status in the world?
In terms of which country being affected, of course, by the disruption of oil and gas, those countries that they themselves don't have oil and gas to produce, they're the most affected. For example, like Japan, Korea, like we mentioned now, Thailand, and also Pakistan and Bangladesh, and many other smaller countries that we are not well known of, then they are being affected. These countries that are more affected will be those not only don't have oil production, but they are not expecting such crisis happen, so therefore they don't have enough oil reserve to withstand for future if the crisis is dragged on. But in terms of industry, they got several levels of industry. For the first direct impact will be on the petrochemical industry, right? Shipping industry, right? And of course insurance industry as well. Then the second layer will be what is the next indirect effect. That means those products that need oil or gas to produce, right? For example, plastic bottle or even semiconductor industry, because semiconductor they need gas, helium gas to produce, right? We may not be aware of, right? Technically, it's a very technical thing, right? And then of course the fertilizer,
Okay, very good that you mentioned fertilizer, because I understand that about 30% of the world's fertilizers also pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So how does this impact Malaysia, and what other industries, specifically in Malaysia, do you think will be affected by this crisis?
This crisis of fertilizer, of course, will impact the small planter. In general, will impact the agriculture. But agriculture, if a big company, right, for commercial like palm oil, rubber, right, big planter, they may have the financial strength to withhold this one. But for the small planter, they may not have a financial strength to withhold or last until the crisis ends. So there might be a problem. So this small planter, agriculture planter, will need government assistance or support. Or otherwise, if it get bread longer, less fertilizer, that means higher cost and lower yield. So will affect also food security in Malaysia, right? But in terms of producer, Malaysia may be some so-called a bit lucky because Sarawak, there are oil and gas, there are more gas industry in Sarawak, which nowadays people will see Sarawak as a savior. They call it, they term is a lot of variety term like Sarawak shield and then swing producer, because quota already production being stopped or not stopped, although the supply is being disrupted, so they have to rely on Sarawak gas. They see this one as a good thing because Sarawak, in terms of locality, Sarawak is located in South China Sea, right? So it actually bypass all these choke point, right? So and also very near to the North Asian country like Japan, Korea, China. So it's in terms of geographical, economically also shorter distance, shorter cost of transportation, and then safer, far away from this current crisis. Currently, due to logistic or geographical advantage, Sarawak we have focused on the Northern Asia, Japan, Korea, China. They are more than enough for Sarawak to cater.
Sarawak is Malaysia's largest producer of liquefied natural gas, LNG. With disruptions to supply from the Middle East, can it step up as a reliable alternative for energy-hungry markets in Asia and Europe? I think we can both agree that war is not a good thing, but looking through the lens of an economist, it may be an accelerator for Malaysia's upstream energy production and will solidify Malaysia's position in the global energy supply chain. Okay, so Doctor, how can Sarawak capitalize on this windfall in the short term?
In the short term, it's very simple. Increase everything, right? Increase the extraction, increase the production of LNG, and then include from the upstream and the downstream, right? I believe that they have the ability to do so. So when you increase everything, it's not only beneficial to Sarawak and Malaysia, it's actually beneficial to all other nations that are actually waiting for it. Currently, we have a good price and a good demand. So for the immediate short term, best strategy will be increase everything, will be good for everyone. It's a win-win situation.
So Sarawak, especially through Bintulu ports, is currently exporting very actively to our Asian neighbours, so namely Japan and South Korea. So is there a possibility that we will also expand our customer base to European countries?
There's a possibility, but maybe perhaps in the medium or long term, right? Currently, due to logistic or geographical advantage, most likely Sarawak will have focused on the Northern Asia, because the Northern Asian demand from, let's say, Japan, Korea, China, they are more than enough for Sarawak to cater. So therefore, in a European country, they are more likely to go for Norway, which like Sarawak, they are also producing more LNG to cater for their market. So in the meantime, more focus on Asian, but in the longer term, Sarawak LNG can be exported to Northern country. That's why in the medium to long term, Sarawak can now take this advantage to sign long-term contract, maybe perhaps for Europe or other country, right? And also seek longer-term investment in brownfield and greenfield, because the price is good, the demand is good. So therefore, we have negotiating power for a better contract and a plan for longer future.
Okay, Doctor, from what you know about Sarawak's current infrastructure for LNG and production in this field, do you think they are capable of coping with the increase in demand?
Yes, of course. If you notice, the Sarawak LNG industry is already been quite some time, it's not recently, and coincidentally, the Sarawak LNG field is actually reaching milestone. They are producing a peak then. So I'm confident that they already have the experience, expertise, and the good timing to capitalize on this advantage, not only for Sarawak and Malaysia, but also as a savior that produce more LNG for other nations that's needed it.
And you also mentioned about how other nations will have a favorable opinion of Malaysia going forth because of this status as a savior. What can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. When you are in trouble and a friend will save you, you will remember the friend much more than when you're in good time. They'll just have a chit chat with you, right? So this other country, they gladly need LNG from Sarawak, and Sarawak can supply to them, actually helping them a lot. So in return, they maybe have a good rapport and build good will between this country with Sarawak.
So, Doctor, higher energy costs are already filtering down the supply chain, and you've got the chain reaction where some countries are advising citizens to work from home, work less in the manufacturing sector to conserve energy. And the Malaysian government is also stepping up its subsidy and trying to reevaluate the subsidy essentially. So what other measures do you suggest the Malaysian government can do to prevent further wastages or essentially leakages?
Yeah, as we see now, those subsidized oil, right? There are a lot of leakages by, for example, illegal selling to other country like Thailand, right? And then unqualified, let's say, passenger come and pump the petrol. So all this need actually more enforcement. Not only more enforcement, but clear instruction and clear SOP. Because without clear instruction, we have clear SOP, the enforcement may be confused, right? And not only that, because enforcement officer is limited, right? We cannot have million officers patrolling everything. So it's also up to the civil service society like us, right, to report or to enforce or to educate so that we reduce these leakages.
So the closure of the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East has very much given us a wake-up call for Malaysia, with the Strait of Malacca being right next to us as a very important world trading position. So 40% of the entire world's trade passes through the Straits of Malacca, and I understand that 80% of China's oil and gas also passes through the Straits of Malacca. So as a country right next to the Strait of Malacca, what can we learn from this in terms of the maritime security as a nation?
Yes, there is a possibility that the same thing can happen in Strait of Malacca, but the possibility is different. So in Middle East, the possibility to have a conflict is higher, but in Strait of Malacca, ASEAN country is known as a neutrality and then a peaceful place, right? So the possibility is less, but in any way, there is no guarantee. Therefore, if anything, a similar thing like the blockage of Strait of Malacca, we be able to use a rail transit. We have the ECRL, right, link Port Klang to the Terengganu side of another part of the sea, right? So therefore, if Strait of Malacca being blocked, there's no way to reach Port Klang through waterway. But we can use railway from Penang and Johor, one on the north and one on the south, and link it to go back to the Terengganu, Kelantan, the east coast there. From there, we can continue the sea shipping towards northern like China, Japan, and Korea. So this may be the best solution that we can come off in terms of medium and short term. Okay? But of course, we have to upgrade this railway system so that we can cater for a big amount of transshipment that can replace the sea shipment.
With all the changes happening in the world as it is currently, and the prices of everything increasing due to the Middle East crisis and the energy sector around the world, what are the 2 or 3 things that you suggest the Malaysian government and private sector do so that we come out on top after this crisis has settled?
From this crisis, we learned that stockpiling reserve is very important, at least for immediate short-term solution. So therefore, to come out of this crisis or to be prepared for future similar crises, I would suggest that Malaysia actually increase the stockpiling of not only gas but oil and gas, right? In addition, since Sarawak is very good in producing the gas, right, and they can seek this opportunity to further invest in this gas sector, either from upstream to downstream, so that you actually not only benefited the economy of Sarawak and Malaysia, it also serves as a cushion for further similar crises in the future. And for our longer term, we plan our energy consumption pattern from a reliable on oil to a reliable on some renewable energy. So in this case, you see China is a very good example, a very good successful transformation. We have our energy transformation plan also. So therefore, we need to speed up and then put more emphasis on transforming away from the fuel reliant in our energy planning.
Okay, we have weathered other storms in the past, COVID-19 being one of them, and other such problems. So do you think that this is significantly different from that, or is it just another one of those storms that will blow over?
This is more significant because in economic perspective, anything that on a supply shock, especially oil supply shock, it had a lasting impact. So in this case, you notice that oil price go up already. You may go down after the crisis end, but it may not go down like the usual before crisis. So, and then those supplier, producer, farmer, small farmer, their business may be affected permanently. So this is a very serious implication, but yet we can learn from this crisis and then be prepared for a better future. And of course, hope that this crisis will end sooner rather than later.
If there's one lesson from the Middle East conflict, it's how quickly a strategic waterway can reshape the global economy. As we apply those lessons to our own Strait of Malacca, one of the world's key trade routes, Malaysia must strengthen its resilience and emerge stronger from global energy shocks. For more valuable insights, join us on Decimal Point.